Welcome into episode 398 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. We hope that all of you listening had a wonderful weekend and are looking forward to a productive week. This week, it's going to start with the Bean Pot on Monday evening. I know Scott is looking very much forward to that as a BU alumni, and Bridget as well as a college hockey fan and broadcaster, and all of us in New England are looking forward to that as well. It's a great tournament through every year in February to get us through the dog days of winter. And of course, we have Bruins hockey to discuss as well over the weekend. So Bridget and Scott, welcome into Monday. How are we doing?
I'm doing okay. Bridget has had some computer issues this morning.
I'm doing better. But wait, I'm in my Raccoon Eras shirt though, so that's what I got going on for me. That's what's getting me through this morning.
Yeah, so we're battling through, but no, it's a good start to the week for the Bruins, who beat the Rangers 6-3 on Saturday. And I guess we can go right into opening shifts because mine is about David Pastrnak, who had a hat trick in that game, plus an assist. But you know, two goals set up by Matt Poitras. One, Pastrnak coming right down the slot, takes a feed, buries it. The other, he just steps into a rocket of a one-timer and then finishes it off with an empty net goal. And earlier that day, Pastrnak had been named the NHL's #1 star for the month of January. And then he starts February off on the same note, just red hot. And, you know, you look at just what he's been doing using that time frame, started January. Now 28 points in 15 games over that time. 6 more than anyone else in the NHL. No one else has more than 22 points. 14 goals during that time, also first in the NHL. And, you know, I don't like, he's obviously still gonna have a ways to go here, but if Pastrnak keeps this up and drags this team into a playoff spot, because let's be honest, like, he is kind of the one dragging this team along right now. Certainly offensively. You know, he's going to end up in the MVP conversation again, which I don't think any of us ever would have thought was going to be on the table through, you know, 2, almost 3 months of this season where, you know, he's down at like 60th in scoring. And we're talking about what's wrong with Pastrnak. And he's admitting that, you know, that he didn't really feel like himself, and missing some of his offseason training maybe affected him more than he thought it was going to. Now this looks like peak Pastrnak yet again. You know, and once again doing it without really, like, no disrespect to Pavel Zacha and Morgan Geekie, but without really having any stud line mates. You know, like we thought bringing in Elias Lindholm was going to be an upgrade for him. It wasn't. Elias Lindholm didn't stick there. They did not have chemistry. So, you know, another season of Pastrnak just kind of just dragging the offense and being everything the Bruins need him to be. You know, I thought after the game, he sounded the most like himself and probably the most confident that he has sounded all year. Even said, like, when I'm on my game, and the sky's the limit when I'm on my game and I'm focused. And you can just tell, like, he's feeling it. And obviously with, you know, taking like the whole trade discussion and paths out of it, just focusing on the ice and what this team needs day to day, game to game, like they need him playing like this. And he is at an important stretch of the season.
It's crazy how good he's been playing. I mean, he's at a 10-game point streak now, or is he over that now?
I think it's 10, because he passed Bobby Orr for second place on career on 10-game point streaks in a career for a Bruin.
Yeah, so that was his 10th game in a row with a point. Like, he's been amazing since the start of 2025. Maybe this is his year. And one person you mentioned in your opening shift that has helped Pastrnak, you know, they have chemistry together, is Matt Poitras, and he's who I wanted to talk about in my opening shift, because He sets up both of those goals, and the first one, he battles through a check behind the net and gets the puck right out in front for Pastrnak to finish it. And then the second goal he assisted on for Pasta was the shift after a penalty kill. Sometimes coach will send them out together because, like, I think he sent out Geeky Pasta Patra because those guys don't kill penalties. So he's like, okay, you guys haven't been on the ice in a while. I'll throw you guys out together. And it ends up with another Pastrnak goal. Another good play by Patra to set that up, which was a crazy slap shot. I think they said it was 94 miles an hour. And yeah, he when he's on the ice with very limited time on the ice with Pasta, he's not on that line. But when they do cross over, say like because it's a half change or because it's that shift after a penalty kill, they seem to always find each other and it seems to always work out. And Pasta benefits from it. Now, that being said, we're not sure if it's a paper transaction or not, but Lettieri and Patra were added to Providence's roster yesterday, Sunday, according to Mark Diver, who reported that it was an AHL transaction by the Bruins. But isn't it the AHL All-Star break? And I don't think the Providence Bruins don't have practice this week. Like it's an off week for them, which lends itself to being a paper move rather than a real, okay, you guys are back down there. Because I would think it was really bad timing to send Patra down though he was quiet for a few games after his call up, few recent games, he didn't have a point in the last 5 games previously to the 2 assists against the Rangers. I still don't think it would be the right move to send him down. So we'll find more out at practice. We're recording this pretty early Monday morning because Scott's got to go to practice. So hopefully just a paper move and he sticks around and can help the team with their offense.
I think that's what everybody is hoping for a Bruins team that has been struggling so much offensively. Prior to that Rangers game, I think they had prior to the Rangers game, they had 4 forwards with a goal in the team's last 5 games. Now, obviously, Matt Poitras didn't score a goal against the Rangers, but he was involved in 2 of Pastrnak's and, of course, is providing offense. So he had a quiet 5 games himself prior to the Rangers game, but you don't send somebody down. That's helping kickstart your offense in a game that this team needed to win. A big head-to-head game against the Rangers that both teams are trying to ideally probably get into that second wildcard spot at the end of the season. So I think everybody would hope that it's just paper transaction and some personnel management.
Also, Brian, I don't know if this is your opening shift, but did we accidentally just totally not start with the big story, which is that JT Miller is not going to be a Bruin and that he ended up with the Rangers and he scored twice against them and that is off the table now, which had kind of been maybe a Hail Mary they could have thrown hey, this is our savior. Let's get this deal done with JT Miller, who is now not available because he's with New York.
Yeah, it wasn't my opening shift, but you're right. We hadn't had a chance to get to that yet. And the JT Miller,
let's save that because I do want to get into that. But
yeah, the JT Miller to the Rangers definitely kind of changes certain outlooks. I think he called it a potential home run deal, Bridget. But my opening shift, I'll keep it brief. I'll get to the numbers later in the episode because I want to get back to Scott's opening shift to start the episode. But basically, there are some key team metrics that I look at that help me identify and anybody identify, just how good a team is top to bottom, where it matters. There's always projected analytics and expected analytics and all that stuff. But if we're looking at the hard numbers, you look at how's the team 5-on-5 and how are they on special teams. Well, even strength and special teams, the Bruins numbers are not pretty, especially when you stack them up against Bruins teams throughout their franchise's history, and I'm gonna go into some of those later in the episode because it's actually quite jarring. Maybe not surprising to those that are watching the team this year, but it is pretty jarring, some of these numbers and where this team's special teams and plus minus stacks up all time in the franchise. But I will just say, if this team wants to get to the playoffs, these categories have to improve, and the power play has scored, I believe now in 3 consecutive games with, if not 3, maybe 4 power play goals in the process. The Rangers game, they had a 5-on-4 to start the game, and it didn't look good at all. It was not a good power play, but they were able to get a 5-on-3 due to was it Lindgren? Lindgren
Yeah,
cross-checking.
they scored on both Lindgren's penalties.
Yeah, Lindgren cross-checks Matty Poitras into the boards, and the Bruins convert just after the 5-on-3 expired. So the power play is improving, and that's going to be important for them if they want to get to the playoffs this year. Bridget and Scott, I did want to go back to the Scott's opening shift to start the episode, unless you had any follow-ups on the special teams. But again, we're going to get to that stuff later. Okay. So building off Scott's opening shift, David Pastrnak entering January at the midway point of the season was on pace for 80 points. He had 40 points through 41 games. And right now he's on pace for around 100. And just how dominant was he for this Bruins team in the month of January? We talk about if he were to keep this up and the Bruins go to the playoffs, you have to consider him as an MVP in the league. Well, David Pastrnak himself accounted for 27% of Boston's goals in the month of January, and he had a point on 56% of Boston's goals in the month of January. And that was the month of January. The Rangers game was in February. And how does he start off February? With a 4-point game, hat trick and an assist. And that hat trick gets him to 18 hat tricks in his career. And among non-North American players, he is ranked 6th all-time in hat tricks with 18. Alex Ovechkin, I believe, is at the top of the list with 31, and Jari Kurri has 23. David Pastrnak is 28 years old, and I think it's very, very realistic to assume he surpasses Jari Kurri's 23 hat tricks when his career is all said and done, and is at least breathing down Ovechkin's neck to be first in the list, but at least second. So, again, I know that David Pastrnak will have his shortcomings in the eyes of Bruins fans, maybe sometimes with puck management or maybe defensively sometimes, though I would argue he's gotten much better defensively throughout his career. I recognize every player has their shortcomings, but what we're witnessing throughout his career right now shouldn't be taken for granted because he really isn't a player that comes around very often. If you look at the Bruins franchise and where he stacks up and will stack up, and where you look at a simple stat like hat tricks among non-North Americans being 6th on that list, and will finish his career at least 2nd, if not 1st. So it's impressive stuff, and yeah, it's cool to get to watch him right now.
Yeah, he's gonna have a good shot at the Bruins record for career hat tricks too, which is 26 by Phil Esposito. So, but yeah, it's also why like the people want to like completely blow up the Bruins, the tear it down, start over crowd. It's like, so you're gonna trade away David Pastrnak, and what you're gonna then spend the next 5 years hoping one of these first round picks you get turns into David Pastrnak? Like, why not just keep David Pastrnak? Like, like his contract's going to age very well with the salary cap increases, which that news came down after our last episode as well. So maybe worth throwing that in. It's going to be a $7.5 million jump this coming season, then another $8.5 million the year after that, and then $9.5 million the year after that. So in the span of 3 years, we're going to go from an $88 million salary cap this year, which is what it is now, up to $113 million. And I think The Athletic put out a graphic that was like what a contract today, like what that number will be in 3 years. And like basically like an $11 million or, $11.5 million 3 years from now is going to be the equivalent of like a $9 million contract right now. So, it's going to look great. Like that's going to be one of the best values in the NHL if Pastrnak continues to play at this level. So, I think, yeah, we know the thing is like, we knew Pastrnak could get back to this level, right? Like what we saw the first half of the season, I think we all recognize like that doesn't look like David Pastrnak. That's not the production we're used to from David Pastrnak. And I had mentioned a couple times, like some of it was bad luck. His shooting percentage was way down, so that was going to come up almost no matter what. Um, and like that has happened, but I also just think you see him just playing better and working to get better chances, setting up better chances. I think the chemistry aspect with Morgan Geekie is real in the sense that like he's found someone who knows, what passes, what plays he's looking for, and has been able to bury some of those chances. Whereas early in the season, maybe he was playing with the line mates who didn't bury chances or didn't even see the ice the same way to get open for a look. Like maybe early in the season we might have seen times where all right, Pastrnak has the puck behind the net, pops out, maybe no one's at the back post for that tap in that Geekie's had a few times. But yeah, I mean, where Pastrnak is now is once again one of the very best players in the world, which is what he's been for several years. It's what we all know he can be. He's even shut up the don't put him on the ice against extra attacker crowds because he's now scored several empty net goals to finish off wins.
And yeah, that's how he got his hat trick. He's been able to, extend the lead and pretty much end games by doing that. And it was a 4-point night for him too, not just the hat trick, but he also assisted on McAvoy's power play goals. So, he was involved in some really quick, nice passing on the power play. And you can see how good of a playmaker he is. When the power play actually looks good, it's normally because Pasta found like a random seam that like pass that looked impossible, but he made it happen. And then, some quick passing down low between Zacha and Lindholm, and it ends up, with a tap in or whatever. But yeah, he's looked great. And if he's going 5-on-5 and, he's starting to go on the power play, that could change things for our special teams, which I know is what Brian wanted to talk about. Because really, if you think about it, he's carrying the team right now, but he's always, it feels like in the past, when the power play is good, he's carrying the power play. I know it's asking a lot, but that's kind of what they need. And he's, he shouldn't be relied on solely because, you wish you could get some bumper contributions from Lindholm or Zacha, maybe some, shots from your defenseman up at the blue line and that get tipped in or something like that. But at this point, it seems like as Pasta goes, the power play goes and as the team goes right now.
Yeah, and look, the team, it's a good win over the Rangers. As we said off the top, those are two teams that are battling for realistically the second wild card position, most likely. And of course, the Rangers got that boost of JT Miller, so you expect a push from them, and JT Miller himself was able to, show up with 2 goals in the contest, but not enough. Bruins get the win.
On 4 hours of sleep. I think they said he got to New York at 4 a.m. and just he barely slept.
Yeah, and I also saw something in Vancouver. Now they have, because they got Marcus Pettersson from the Penguins. Now Vancouver has Elias Pettersson, Marcus Pettersson, and there's another. They got 3 Petterssons or Petersons over there on that team now.
Yeah, the other Elias Pettersson, the defenseman.
Yeah, there's 2.
So needless to say that with all those Petterssons, JT is happy to be in New York. But look, this Bruins team still have an uphill battle to make the playoffs, in my opinion. On points percentage, they're still on the outside looking in, and certain areas have to improve down the stretch if they want to become a playoff team. Special teams is one of them. Before we get to special teams, heading into the Rangers game, the Bruins were a -29 in the season goal differential. Right now, they're -26 after a 6-3 win. That is the team's worst plus-minus since the 06-07 season, where they were, I think they were a -70. And this season has been an anomaly in a lot of areas, and goal differential is one of them, because since the final year of the original 6 in the NHL, which was the 1966-1967 season, the Bruins as a franchise have only had 7 seasons where they had a minus goal differential. Right now, they're on pace for the 8th season in 58 years. So this is not normal for Bruins hockey to be this porous, certainly defensively, and the combination of that and a lack of offense. So they're probably going to finish the year, I would imagine, still a minus, even if they make the playoffs. But I found that interesting. And in fact, the last 2 times the Bruins missed the playoffs, in 14-15 and 15-16, they ended the season with a plus goal differential, which just goes to show how hard it is to make the playoffs in this league. And we're used to it with the Bruins, but it's not easy. And they have to shore up defensively and find some scoring depth. Scott, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, well, obviously, like, one of the biggest problems in terms of that goal differential is how many games they've just let completely get away from them. Like, though the 8-1s, 5-1, 7-2, 6-2, like those, it feels like in years past, there's been plenty of Bruins teams that have up and down stretches or hit a rough patch, but they've pretty much always been able to keep games close. So, like, those games would have been 3-1, 4-2, and not just you just don't see it in years past. The in the third period, especially, the way this team has just completely collapsed at times and let goals just start to pile up. And like, so that's part, that's not like any sort of defense or excuse for being a minus 26, but that's where that really adds. Like, even just that stretch this past week, those back-to-back losses, it's like, boom, there's a -9 added to your total. Like, it happens fast when you get blown out. And the flip side is this team offensively doesn't score enough to blow teams out. So there's no counterweight there.
You just look at the 2 games against Winnipeg, and you're already like -10. Like, those 2 games against the Jets were terrible, wasn't it? Like 8-1 and what was the one the other day? 6-2,
right? Yeah.
So yeah, you're pretty much, those 2 are killing your goal differential, and they killed Swayman's stats too. The first one that Swayman was in.
Now, Scott, goal differential is including special teams, correct? It's not. Yep. That's not a strictly so. That's the other element of it too. The special teams is killing their goal differential as well. Now, when you mentioned their inability to stop the bleeding, Scott, defensively when things start to snowball, and then their inability to fight back offensively, these are, as you said, you're not making excuses, and it's just the reality of what this team is. It's not normal for a Bruins team, and this is why I'm saying, if you look at their goal differential, they're among, if you look, so like I said, dating back to the final year of the original 7 years prior to this year with a minus goal differential. And then I think in their 100+ year history now, I think they had like 28 years with a minus goal differential, and more than half of them came in the 60s and 50s. So the Bruins are a team that prides themselves on two-way hockey. But as I said, special teams is also contributing to their negative goal differential. So let's talk about their special teams. The Bruins right now are 75% on the penalty kill. I don't know if you guys saw my tweet. Would you like to wager a guess as to how long it's been since they've had this poor of a penalty kill, or would you like me to just spare the suspense and say it?
Well, I feel like that 06-07 season you referenced, like that's always like, it's the worst since then, because that was the Dave Lewis year that was just abominable. So I'm just gonna pick that.
Okay, Bridget, do you have a guess?
I'm gonna let you. Well, we're just gonna go with Scott's guess, I guess. And is that right?
It's incorrect, and I understand why Scott would say that, because yes, it is Bruins fan nature, Bruins media nature to always revert back to the 06-07 season for bad stats.
And how about the 2015 draft? Does that ever get brought up by Bruins?
Once or twice, maybe on a good day. So that, as I said, that Bruins team was a -70, I believe, goal differential. But their special teams were better than this Bruins team, and that includes both special teams, including the penalty kill. So the Bruins in 2024-2025's 75% on the penalty kill is the team's worst penalty kill since the 1978-1979 season, where they killed off 74.7% of their penalties against them. Well, that's not good. So we'll leave that there. Let that breathe for a second. And the power play, which heading into the Rangers game was 14.2%, is now 15.2%. But it is still the worst Bruins power play since the 2001-2002 season, where they had a 13.8% conversion rate on the power play. So when you look at their power play being worse than it has been over 20 years, when you look at their penalty kill being worse than it has in 50-something years, or close to it, and then the goal differential being as bad as it has been in just about 20 years, and their points percentage, when you look at their playoff positioning right now, this is going to be an uphill battle, and I think it's being hidden by the games that they've played over other teams. It's going to be an uphill battle for this Bruins team to make the playoffs, and if they want to sniff them at all of these areas that feed each other have to vastly improve.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned like the power play has picked up a little bit recently, and it has three straight games with a goal, 2 goals Saturday. I know not all the power plays individually looked great, but like you're getting some results, which is most important. The penalty kill is not improved. Like I was just looking up, so the last 6 games, they're 16 for 23 on the penalty kill, which is 69%, and that's not very nice. So
Good
like
one.
that thank you. Be signing autographs after the show. So that's an area that remains very up and down, and I think we all know, you know, we're not ready to trust the power play yet either, despite three games of scoring. So yeah, like there's still huge improvements that need to happen in that area, because that is where they're underwater the most. Like 5-on-5, they're a -4, which isn't great. You know, like you got to be in the plus 5-on-5 for me to really believe you're gonna have any chance of doing anything. But they're way underwater in special teams goal differential. And I didn't look this up updated, but I know like late last week when I looked, Bruins were second worst in special teams net goal differential, behind only Anaheim. So that's, you know, your how much on the plus you are on the power play versus how much on the minus you are on the penalty kill. Bruins are like near the bottom of the league in both. Like they're one of the worst power plays, obviously, by both percentage points and by goals scored. And then penalty kill wise, because they take so many penalties, along with a not very good percentage, are underwater. And like they're so it's like minus 20 something on the season. Like that's obviously just not good enough. You got to be like, if you're trying to figure out the recipe for doing something in the playoffs, it's like you can maybe overcome, you know, not being good in special teams if you're great at 5-on-5. But if you're going to be middle of the pack or even slightly worse than that 5-on-5, then you better be really good on special teams. And the Bruins don't have either of those things. They're middle of the pack 5-on-5 and really bad on special teams. Like it's, again, like this is why I think we're all like, this team is running out of time to prove to management that they're worth any investment, because that is just not a winning formula. Like as the kids would say, the math isn't mathing.
Scott, why do you have to do that? And you made a 69 joke. Come on. It's too early for this.
Listen, I got college hockey tonight. You know, I gotta get in touch with what the 20-year-olds are.
Okay, yeah. You know what? I specifically, and maybe I'm just getting old, I specifically bought tickets where I didn't think I'd be sitting next to students. I was like, I can't, because one bean pot. So I'm going as a fan. One bean pot, I was stuck behind this kid that was trying to hit on this girl, and he was just talking about crypto the whole game, and he was about 6 feet tall, and I'm 5'3", and I couldn't see by him, and I was like so pissed off at this kid that I was like, you know what? I bought myself nice tickets. I'm not sitting next to the students. Sorry, like I wanted to have a better experience than that year. But Scott, what I'm hearing you saying is that you miss Derek Forbert.
No, I don't think I'm saying that at all.
That's what I heard. The penalty kill, the numbers with Derek Forbert were always good. So I feel like I'm hearing, you're not saying it, but you are saying it.
Nope, I think I'm all good on the Derek Forbert experience. But like in all seriousness, like you should have enough personnel to have a good penalty kill. Like you have defensemen on this team who, in theory, know how to defend and should be effective on a penalty kill. And like Brendan Carlo has been pretty much his entire career. And this year, I think there's been a bunch of times we've seen him just struggle in coverage on the penalty kill.
I also thought Nikita Zadorov was kind of going to be a guy that came in and was Forbert-esque at cleaning out the front of the net and blocking shots and stuff, but I don't think that they are actually very similar penalty killers.
No, they're not. I will say, analytically, Zadorov has been one of their better penalty killers for whatever that's worth. Again, it's not a great penalty kill in general, so no one looks awesome. But I do think on a per minute basis, he's been out for fewer goals shorthanded than just about anyone else.
Yeah, I mean it's ugly, guys. It's ugly. Jimmy Carter was the president the last time their PK was this bad. So you want to make the playoffs.
Is that what you were just typing? You're just like, who was the president?
You want to make the playoffs start there.
I mean that 79 team did make it to the Final Four, so they have that going for them.
Yeah. Hey, look, never
season,
say never.
By the way, that season ended with maybe the most infamous penalty kill in Bruins history, which was the too many men on the ice penalty against Montreal.
Well, that's not a wound I was expecting to reopen for Bruins fans in this Monday morning. Sorry about that, guys. I apologize for Scotty there. But yeah, look, so it just has to get better, and we all know it. But the question isn't. We all know it has to get better. The question is, can it get better? And if we're sitting here in November or even December, you can sit there and say, well, it's the first half of the season. They'll figure it out potentially. You get to a certain point, and approaching the trade deadline is one of them, where a team is who they've been all season long. I think the Bruins have 29 games left, and come trade deadline, they'll have around 20. So it's, you don't make trade deadline deals at the end of the season. You still have to figure out who you are with about 20 games left. And like I said, it's not looking good for them. And again, if you look at their playoff odds right now, they're in a dogfight. They're in a dogfight. So if you wanna, what's your easiest way to make the playoffs in a 2025 NHL? Have strong special teams. Do they have the personnel or the psyche this year? More importantly, to do that, or the coaching? I'm going to say no, because it's what I've seen all year, and the power play is getting better. That's good, but that penalty kill, and it's just ugly. And give me a reason to not think that.
And sorry, Bridget, real quick, as we sit here on Monday morning, Money Puck has the Bruins at 25% to make the playoffs.
Yeah, that's gone down quite a bit. Yeah. So what I was going to say when you mentioned personnel, Brian, and you're talking about, do they have the personnel, coaching, whatever, to make the playoffs right now? I think that ties into the JT Miller thing, because if you think about it, last week when we're having this conversation about, okay, they're trending away from the playoffs, like they're losing games they need to win at this point in the season. But you're in the back of your mind, you're like, well, they're in these trade rumors that might, maybe if they pan out, might be able to change things and might be able to turn things around. And a guy like JT Miller coming in as a number one center is obviously a huge move. Not knowing exactly what you'd have to give up in return, but that was something that we thought, hey, maybe, which obviously it's an impossibility at this point. So, are those big moves still out there for them to, I guess they have, as of right now, I don't know if there's any other big trade rumors that they're in on, after missing out on that one. But I guess the question is, did they miss their opportunity to add someone like that when JT Miller ended up going to the Rangers instead? And And there was some other, bigger moves that have already happened early, like well before the trade deadline and before Four Nations. And like, are there going to be other guys available that would even be worth that kind of shot at, because you would need someone that, makes sense now and in the future.
Yeah. So it's tough because you look at the JT Miller deal, and so the Rangers get JT Miller, Eric Brandstrom, who had been on waivers like earlier that week, and Jackson Dorrington, who we'll see playing for Northeastern in the Beanpot. And they give up Philip Hedl, Victor Mancini, young defenseman, kind of defensive defenseman, and a first round pick. And I look at that, and like on the surface, it's like, yeah, that's not much. To me, it looks like a win for the Rangers. I would say, if the Bruins had a way to match that, you should, like, we were trying to figure out on Twitter and at Don Sweeney, our friend, not Don Sweeney, but Don's Weenie, posited that like the equivalent might have been something like, because the Bruins also would have had to make the salary match, which the Rangers didn't because they had cap space. Maybe something like Pavel Zacha, Andrew Peak, and a first round pick. And then you might have to throw in something extra because that's a little bit of an older package than what Vancouver got from the Rangers. But like that's something like that is probably in the ballpark. The complicating factors are many. Like, you have to be comfortable bringing JT Miller into your room because he's kind of like a wrecking ball of a personality. Like, he just takes over. He's very confrontational, both on the ice and by a lot of accounts in the room. Like, he'll challenge guys, he'll call them out. And I know like the initial reaction is like, that's great. The Bruins might even need more of that. But he's worn out his welcome on more than one team now. I think there are teammates who don't enjoy playing with him. And you have to be comfortable bringing that in. And like, if the Bruins looked into what happened in Vancouver and were like, nah, I don't know if we really want to bring that into our room, it's like, it's hard for me to disagree with that conclusion if that's what you come to. Because you have to know your locker room dynamics. You have to know what you're comfortable with. And you're taking a guess at how Miller's going to fit, by the way, on a contract that locks him up until his late 30s. So this isn't like, oh, he's only signed for 2 more years. If it doesn't work out, we'll move on. Like, you would have him for 5 more years. So you have to do all that. And then JT Miller also had a full no movement clause. We don't know if he even would have been willing to come to Boston if they had made the best offer. We also don't know if Vancouver would have liked Zacha and Peak more than Hedl and Mancini. Like, there's so many factors here where it's like, it's easy to be like, oh, the Bruins should have been willing to match that because it doesn't look like a super steep price to pay. But when you account for all that other stuff, it's like, for all we know, the Bruins might have never been even remotely close to even like having a chance to make a real offer.
Well, the no movement clause alone means that it wasn't in their hands necessarily. Like, he could have been off the table from day one, on his end. So, but what I was going to say is the Rangers also do maybe know his personality better because they've had him before and were willing to take the risk on him again because they actually had like that prior relationship with him because he's going back to New York. Whereas like other teams that he's never been on don't really know what the experience would be like. So that could also have been a factor. But yeah, point being, and complications aside, what I wanted to get at is, the move, like, is there a big move out there that the Bruins can do now? Like, just even if the options weren't the best or the easiest, like, there were the options, you know what I mean? So is there something else out there to be had that's not gonna mortgage your future, like that you can? And also, is it just time to sell? Like, are we out of that conversation at this point? But I just wanted to bring up the JT Miller thing because it had been something we talked about a bunch. And I don't think they're moving Pettersson now. So, I mean, it was one or the other. So yeah, that's off the table too. So it's just other things that are gone out the door, not available. So we'll have to wait for the next rumor, I guess, because those are done.
Yeah, I mean, pulling away another team's 1C was the only rabbit in the hat that the Bruins could have possibly even had. And to the points you guys have illustrated here, that's not an option anymore. Whether or not it was likely in the first place or not, that was the only speculation. Because I've been saying for a while now, like, the Bruins should not be investing in this team. If they make the playoffs this year, it will be because it should be because they sold a few pieces and still found a way to make the playoffs. And that can happen. Like, it's not impossible. I'm not saying that you sell a few pieces that are inevitably not long for Boston, that you're kissing your playoff chances away, especially when you're looking at some of the players I'm talking about. Because also the Bruins can continue this retool and selling off some pieces in the offseason. Like, there's a couple of players under contract, in my opinion, that I think the Bruins should inquire moving on from. I think Charlie Coyle's a name. I think Brandon Carlo's a name. You don't have to move those guys this season. I think there's always an argument to be had that value is highest at the deadline, but those guys have 2 more. Carlo has 2 more years after this. I think Coyle has 1, so that might be tougher to move. But Carlo has term, and if they want to explore those in the summer, they can do that and still have them for this season. But to me, if you want to talk about the path that Cam Neely mentioned, the 2 paths, it's so obvious to me. And the only argument that anybody could have made to me was what Scott mentioned last episode, which was maybe it could be a deal that helps you now and in the future because there's term on it. And that's still an option with other players not named JT Miller. But if we're talking specifically at center ice and high-end center iceman, I don't see who that player would be. So I think if we're talking your future number 1 center, I feel like that still has to come from within, because you're not just going to pull that from another team unless something crazy happens like the Vancouver stuff and that just played out. So I think right now the Bruins are kind of probably palms up with what their future is number 1 center, because you just drafted Dean Letourneau. That's not a sure thing he even makes the NHL, and if he does, it could be years from now, and it might not be as number 1 center. And the free agent market is not really a high-end center friendly one this coming summer, so at all really. So they'd have to wait the following year, and I don't even know who that would be. But
Jack
yeah,
Eichel.
Okay, there you go. So they're in a tough spot. Like, the Bruins are in a tough spot. We always knew that they were at center ice with a true number 1 center, but the JT Miller or Elias Pettersson kind of gave a glimmer of hope of there's that potential, loophole, and that loophole is gone.
By the way, I've heard some of the BC fans calling it the Dean pot for Dean Letourneau because he scored the other day. So it's the Dean pot in case you're celebrating and you want to, get an eye on Dean Letourneau for the day. But yeah, I don't know. I was just that's all I had to say was it's the Dean pot. But I guess really too, Matt Poitras being, an internal solution, not but still young, and hopefully they didn't actually send him down and it was just a paper transaction. So that doesn't help them this year, really, because he is what he is for now. Could he develop into that at some point? Yes, but that's not what he is now. Not that there's anything wrong with where he's at, because he's still young. But realistically, he's going to have to get stronger still. And, there's aspects of his game that are still in their early phases because he's only 20. He's not even legal drinking age yet. So yeah.
Letourneau didn't he still hasn't scored a goal yet, right? I think.
Oh, okay. For some reason I thought he had one in garbage time the other day, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I saw he did have a shorthanded breakaway where he actually passed out of the shot to set up Teddy Stiga for an even better chance, and I think Stiga hit the crossbar. But yeah, since you mentioned Poitras, one thing I want to bring up quick, and this ties back to your opening shift a little, is because I already see some of this online, which is look what happens when you put Poitras with Pastrnak. Like it, boom, it's just like magic. I would caution against that because they're being used in a very specific situation, which is the first shift after a penalty or after a penalty kill. In the case of their first goal Saturday, after the Rangers scored a power play goal. So, same situation on the second one. And that is a good situation to throw those guys out there because you want some guys with some offensive touch to try to provide a spark and build off, again, either build off the momentum of a penalty kill or swing momentum back after giving up a goal to the other team's power play. You're using guys who aren't on the penalty kill, which is why Zacha isn't being used on those shifts because he is on the penalty kill. But you're also getting them out there against weaker competition because all of the opponent's best players were just on the ice for the power play. So those are it. We often, when you talk about like the vulnerable minute, that can kind of go both ways. It's usually used to talk about the team that's killing the penalty because they might remain stuck in their zone. But I'd also say the team that was on the power play is a little vulnerable in that situation because their best players need a rest. So using Poitras and Pastrnak together in that situation makes all the sense in the world. I still don't know if it makes sense to just use Poitras as your first line center full time because he's still only playing 12, 13 minutes a game. If you're moving up to the top line, that goes up to like 16, 17. And I don't know that he's ready for that. We still see him take a lot of hard hits. You still want to make sure that he's going to hold up and get through the season. And I would also say, like, I think Pavel Zacha has done a lot of the dirty work that line has needed, especially in the defensive zone. And I don't know if Poitras is really ready to handle that responsibility yet. So I think the way the Bruins are using it right now is the best way to do it, which keep Geeky, Zacha, and Pastrnak together because that line has been doing well. And then you use Poitras in these advantageous situations right after a penalty kill.
And I like Matt Poitras. I think he's a really skilled player. He's a really smart player, and I think he plays bigger than his size, which is an admirable attribute to have. I question if he has the scoring ability to be a true number one center in the NHL. I think could you be a number one center in the NHL with 60 to 65 points? Yeah, I don't think that's what any NHL franchise would probably hope for. I think that's not ideal. You know, I'm curious what you guys think. Like, because we just talked about it internally, the Bruins don't have Matt Poitras is their only option right now. If we're talking like a young prospect that could be a future potential number one center, which again, I think his upside's probably a 2C, but certainly a top 6 player when he hits his stride and he gets bigger and stronger. But part of me feels like the Bruins' best bet right now at their long-term high end 1C would probably be if they had a top 15 pick in the draft this year. Like that's probably the best. I mean, maybe the argument is Matt Poitras is already an NHLer and that's not a guarantee for any draft pick. So probability wise, what's their best option for a long-term true one center? Dean Letourneau, Matt Poitras, or a phantom top 15 pick we don't know about? The answer is going to be Poitras based off probability. But if we're talking high-end talent, like you can probably find that kid hopefully with a top 15 pick this year. But it's not really a great draft from what I'm hearing.
Right. That's the problem is you're probably gonna have to be even higher than that. Like you probably have to be top 6 or 7. I think like the guys that are gonna go in the 10 to 15 range, you're realistically, you're probably hoping more for a middle six center. And that's really probably most years. Like, I don't think you're finding number ones outside the top 10 generally.
Hashtag tank for Higgins, as Bridget coined last week.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. No, I think that there's a few teams that there's no way to catch up ground on at this point. You're not catching them.
Scott, and Bridget, but where does your mind go, Scott, with when you see JT Miller go off the board? I know we have a hard out coming up here, but when you see JT Miller go off the board, and that makes you assume Elias Pettersson's going to stay put in Vancouver, where does your mind go as a Bruins fan, Bruins media member, about what they're going to do at that position? Do you think they hold out and hope that Jack Eichel has a soft spot for Boston in a couple of years, or he probably loves his situation in Vegas, realistically speaking? Like, what is it's got to be, does it have to be through the draft, in your opinion, Scott, or do you see something on the horizon, Jack Eichel or something else that Boston could go after?
Well, yeah, I mean, through the draft is generally the best. Like, if you look around the league at elite number one centers, most of them were through the draft and they were top 5 picks. I think you just have to be very open-minded about every and any situation that presents itself. Maybe it is 2026. Eichel does get to free agency. And by the way, Jack Eichel has said in the past that he would like to play for the Bruins one day. Now, that might be like the very end of his career, because I think he's having a great time in Vegas. But I don't know. Like, does Tage Thompson pop loose because things aren't going well in Buffalo? Like, it's why I said, like, they had to at least be talking to Vancouver about Pettersson and or Miller, because you have to explore every avenue, and it's probably not going to be perfect. They're just, unless you have that very high pick, there isn't a perfect way for a number one center to fall into your lap. Like, it doesn't happen. You have to get creative. You have to take chances, and hope it pays off.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. We appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your work week, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.